Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Conspiracy Theory Fun Show. You can call me Mr. CTF. My wife, Mrs. CTF. Go ahead and subscribe or hit the like button. Today, we're going to be talking about the matriarchy, feminism. For me, it's more about just getting the things rebalanced. And it really had a personal effect from my sister. She went to university, and after university she just got kind of inundated with these weird feminist liberal concepts, and we come from a liberal family too, so that just didn't help her out in life, and kind of led her down this like 10-year long saga that ended in her killing herself. So I'm gonna be tamping down on modern feminism and that movement, and saying that instead of being feminists, women should go back to being part of the matriarchy and rebuilding that power structure, which was a lot more robust. And I think from the male side, I would say that the idea of the patriarchy is pretty much a feminine projection. Obviously women get together and talk a lot more and talk about feelings and have a lot more opportunity to like kind of like plan day-to-day lives things, and so there used to be a matriarchy, and the male counterpart is kind of a structure of society that's kind of second in power to that matriarchy and not very powerful, because men don't really get to talk together and talk about feelings or plan things. Like, we kind of like argue and are mostly competing against each other. So basically the patriarchy is a female projection of their own matriarchy that used to exist. And what's going on today, like with people like Jordan Peterson, is really for the first time in history, males are kind of getting together. We've been basically bashed over the head by females with psychological 2x4s for like the past like 200 years, I don't know. And so basically what those movements represent is really just like the internet is finally allowing males to kind of get together and talk about things in a non-competitive environment, which is traditionally been the male environment, reflecting on nature being pretty masculine with the all the killing that goes on in nature and stuff like that. So to balance that, I'm arguing that the females and the feminists need to retask themselves, or actually focus a little bit and rebuild the matriarchy, which why I say rebuild the matriarchy is because I believe the matriarchy used to be a lot more powerful than they are today. They've basically been forgot about, and if you look back at civilization, there's a lot of things that women did that would have had to have some sort of power structure behind them. If you just look back 100 years ago, was abolition. Like, there's no way that feminists could do abolition today. Just no way. Forget about it. Just getting the voting rights, that's like a total that shows the power of the matriarchy. Like, if women were tasked with getting the voting rights today, like, they can't do another step up like that, because there's no matriarchal structure to support that. And then just even the institution of marriage, that's a total matriarchal structure. The family is basically a matriarchal structure, and those in the West are just decimated. You have 50% of marriages failing now. Why do you think that is? Probably because males have like 50% of the vote now, with regards to marriage and stuff like that. So, and then like even the idea that forced marriages, which is basically the old system that people all over the world used to use, are like part of a patriarchal organization, is just nutcase insane. It's like men. Can you imagine like men back in the day being like, "Oh, I want to play matchmaker"? Like my dad, like he like tried doing that once, and he's just like, "I'm never gonna do that again." Like men just don't have the mind. We don't have the emotional competence. Like marriage and figuring out who's gonna marry who is basically a feminine function. That's a matriarchal function. And like maybe every once in a while, like fathers would be like, "Hey, I don't really want my daughter or son to marry that broke ass person over there, because that's just not fair for us as the family." So like I'm gonna just tamp down that. But basically it would have probably been all run by the matriarchs. So just like looking back to, what are more evidence of the matriarchal structures too is like basically you have a dedicated church, Catholics, very strong into Maria. Jesus basically looks like a girl too. He's got long hair, not a typical manly man, So that's pretty dedicated. You had lots of queens that are very, very powerful. Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth. Put Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth against Frau Merkel. Like who's really more powerful? Like, come on, that's a joke. Or even in Germany, you had like what I call the real Mother Teresa. She had 13 kids. Rode in the battle once with a baby in her arms, and was like, "Hey, you guys got to fight for me," And like her troops were pretty successful against Freddie, the Prussian guy, So that's a pretty powerful thing, So in a sense, on behalf of my sister and her fallen arguments, or her wasted life following the fourth wave feminism, maybe I'm just crowning myself like world's leading feminist, and I'm going to appoint then someone like to rebuild the matriarchy, and I think I'm going to appoint AOC to do that because I think she really is on fire, and she might be a double agent too. There's the side conspiracy theory here. Her name means Alexandria, obviously from Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the old world, and then Ocasio, that's the middle name. I actually looked this up. It means occasionally, or just the word or. And Cortez is obviously the conqueror of the New World, So AOC is basically the conqueress. So she's just from her name, she's pretty qualified. And then what I really like about her is I watched a video once of her, and she basically would use my arguing style when I'm losing an argument, which I really liked, was that when she was kind of like not making any sense at all, because I like to argue. This is probably why I don't really have that many friends. Then I just leave and say, "You're racist and you're wrong," and she essentially does the same thing, and then you just say that, and then you leave the argument, and they're left like with that really bitter feeling, and like they've won the argument, but they still feel bad. Is the whole idea. Where I've lost the argument, but I feel great because I'm saying they're racist and they're wrong in spite of everything. So I really like when she does that. And then also she's pointing out what I really liked was she said that like white male conservatives are sexually frustrated, and I just thought that's like she's the only politician that has the balls to say that, like she's the only one that gets us, and she gets not just white guys that are sexually frustrated. Basically, the whole of masculinity is sexually frustrated. That's how guys are made, to be sexually frustrated, actually. And just to really drive home that point too, you might have heard of this guy named Einstein. He said some stuff, and one of the things he said was that 90% of the brain isn't used. And he was a guy, obviously, so you've been talking about that perspective. And what's going on here is that basically guys think about women 92% of the time, and women don't even know about it, right? Here's what happens is that 47% of the time men are thinking about women, and then 45% of the time men are trying to hide the fact that they're thinking about women that 47% of the time. And so those kind of cancel out, and you get 2% of the time men are thinking about women positively, and you only have 8% more brain power. So really, that's what Einstein is saying, is that if men can be disciplined enough to tap into their hidden brain power, which is basically always thinking about women, maybe you can be a genius, Maybe that's the difference between someone who's like 160 points IQ and someone like me who's like 100 IQ, is that maybe if I just said, okay, I'm only going to think about women I'm only going to think about women 40% of the time, and then think not about women 38% of the time, then that only adds up to 78% of miss, and then gives me another, like, doubles my intelligence, basically, right? So I think AOC gets that. She might be a double agent, which would be cool for guys too. And then she could obviously rebuild the matriarchy. She's connected enough, and that would be a good balance to fixing, I think, Western civilization, which is pretty much taking off, you know, and if there's going to be more masculine energy now, especially if you think about like the World War One and the World War Two and stuff like that, those are really tamping down on masculine forces. You know, you basically had Germany detribalized, and then you had like Russia detribalized. Basically, all the dumb masculine people are just sent to war and they get killed, and that's basically what happens. And so now the feminists probably need the matriarchy more than ever because we're in a feminizing phase in the West now, because after 100 years of World War One and Two, those imbalances that favored feminism are basically being replaced by nature now, as the sexes are evenly balanced again, and then male forces are becoming more and more powerful again, because the matriarchy has just been disbanded, you know. So that's pretty cool. And then I just, as a guy, I just like to throw in one thing at the end, you know, if I may. Really, when women say that men can't understand childbirth, this is just insane. Like, this is the stupidest thing ever. If men couldn't understand stuff like that, right, like, you'd have no advanced physics, and you just have generally, like, men dying on swords. You know, you just have guys going like, oh, how does this work? I really couldn't understand that pain. I had to kill myself. Or, like, what do women think that men are doing? Like, sitting outside the delivery room, like, oh, man, it must be so painful. Like, when you sit in a lazy boy or something, and, like, the mechanism doesn't work, and you can't lean back. Like, oh, that must be how painful it is. Or, like, when you go to McDonald's, and they say they don't have any more chicken nuggets, and you can't get the chicken nuggets, you know. Or when you, like, are pulled over by a cop and you tell them that they love you, or you tell the cop that you love them, and and the cop says that he's going to shoot you if you get out of the car and try and hug him, you know. That's like heartbreak, just painful, you know. And so, like, really, and then if you just think about it more, is that if you have one woman that has a hard pregnancy and another woman that has a non-hard pregnancy, then is that, like, one that had the hard pregnancy, say the one that didn't have the hard pregnancy, like, you can't understand, you know? Like, literally, being empathetic is part of the basis of human civilization, and it just is such a waste of feminine power to be so unempathetic as to say that men can't understand the pain of childbirth. You know, it just makes you look silly. So I guess that's about all I have to say on this subject. Again, I'm just trying to rebalance forces that I think have been thrown off balance. This is one of the main things that was my sister and I talked about this a little bit. I did really help her out in like 2019, but then 2020 rolled around with the pandemics, and since I'm antisocial, I didn't really talk to her that much, even though I did invite her out to Germany to say just take a couple weeks off to just reassess the situation. But, you know, she eventually killed herself. I think a driving force of that was like the fourth wave feminism, which is horribly imbalanced, and so that would be my suggestion as a fix. And I was gonna, for this video, I was gonna appoint myself feminist world leader in stewardship on behalf of my sister, and then appoint AOC, but I thought I'd save that trouble. I might get in trouble for doing that. But if it comes down to it, I will make legal arguments that I am the feminist world leader, if I have to.